Hey everybody, today I'm going to be reviewing The Social Network. This film came out in 2010. It was written by Aaron Sorkin and directed by David Fincher. I hadn't seen this movie in years actually, but I'd always been meaning to return to it and to review it just because I think it's just a really well done American tale, and it's just meticulously structured, and it just has a sophistication, an air about it that is just more mature than a lot of the movies that I do see in Hollywood. There are many different aspects of the filmmaking process that I could point to in terms of why this film works so well, but I will say, as I was watching the movie this last time, the word that kept popping into my head was just the word collaboration. This film is full of brilliant collaborations that maybe on the surface you may be a bit skeptical of, but they seem to work. And of course the foundation of all of that lies between the director and the writer. And you know, some definitely saw the two of them, the matchup between the two of them as quite paradoxical, but the irony is that they work like peanut butter and jelly. It's just one of those things where they seem to be so different on the surface, but I think that they have more in common than one might think. They're both people that really like to pay attention to detail. And I think that is the crux of it. That is where they shine. Sorkin is somebody that throughout his career, I've struggled with him. I think he's one of those guys who can either be completely brilliant or just absolutely insufferable. He's known for that mile-a-minute Spitfire dialogue that was made famous by people like Ben Hecht and Preston Sturges, Herman Mankiewicz, from those films in the 1930s and 40s, particularly the rom-coms. I've always loved that style. I think there's a musicality to it and a flow, and when it works, it absolutely crackles. And I have to say, I do appreciate that Sorkin has revived that for the modern era, because I do see it as a lost art. Doesn't always work though, because I think the last film that I saw that was written by Sorkin was Steve Jobs, and then I saw a bit of The Newsroom, and both of those are examples of where he completely falls flat for me. And I think a lot of it is because it is so forced and pompous as fuck. I mean, that's one of the reasons, that's one of the things that puts me off about Sorkin, is just the level of pretentiousness. And in those particular films, everything is on the surface. The writing feels sophomoric because the characters lack richness and the structure of it. It just doesn't, it feels very much like Playwright 101. There's no refinement or real subtlety, and that's where it comes off as trite, like a lot of smoke and mirrors. But when he is on, God damn, is he on. And this is a perfect example of where he is. And I think that this is by far the best film or the best writing he's ever done. It's fast, it's rhythmic, it's so witty. And I think the reason it's so interesting because it is such an old-fashioned style of dialogue and of speaking, and yet the quickness of it matches the digital world, the hipster generation, and this constant bombardment of information where we feel so overwhelmed. It just really fits the tone of everything. And I will say though, I did see a little bit, I have seen a little bit of the behind the scenes footage, of course, over the years. And one thing that I did notice is that I think that Fincher, as wonderful of a person he is in terms of understanding narrative structure and all of that, I think that he may have tamed the beast a little bit. I think that he may have kind of reined Sorkin in and made sure that he wasn't too overwrought all the time. And I think that the two of them, they just bounce off each other. They bring out the best in each other. Fincher has a very grim view of the world, as we've come to know through his work. And you know, he has this real ability to express isolation in a very creepy, a very eerie tone visually that paints a picture around the very detailed dialogue. One thing that I love about him, and I don't think it's mentioned enough, is that Fincher has this great ability to add these little digital touches, and they're not very obnoxious or anything like that. Like for example, the Winklevoss twins, you know, having the two of them and having Armie Hammer's face digitally imposed on the other actor is just, it's a brilliant thing, and not something you really notice until they bring it up in the behind the scenes footage. It adds just this hint of coldness, this hint of artificiality in the modern world. Another key to the film is of course the collaboration between Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor for the musical score. Reznor is of course Trent Reznor. You know, he's such a badass, and you know, Nine Inch Nails is one of the great mainstream bands of my generation, and I think having the two work on that is just brilliant. It's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, like why didn't I think of that? You know, Reznor and Fincher are so great together, and yet I didn't even think about it. The music peppers in all of these little electronic textures in the background in a way that does feel very kinetic, and it's deeply personal at the same time, because there's this simple piano motif that reverberates throughout the film, and that there it just kind of reminds us of that lonely soul under the exterior that kind of lurks beneath the Mark Zuckerberg character. We see that emotional theme honestly in the very first scene. It's a great opening scene. It's one of those where it's the perfect model. If you want to learn to be a great writer, this is the perfect scene to look at in order to kind of study scene structure, because it seems to be just checking everything off the list, planting the idea, seeing the payoff, and seeing the arc. We learn everything we need to know about Mark Zuckerberg in this scene, and it serves as a blueprint for the rest of the movie. The scene is a date at a bar between him and the girl he's going out with named Erica, and he's throwing out all of these statistics. He's going off on this tangent, and he's not waiting for her to keep up with him. We can tell that he's extremely smart, really a genius, but he uses his intelligence as a defense mechanism because he can't connect on that emotional level with people. It's his way of building his confidence, and then he finds a way to condescend to other people, and of course in this scene particularly, he's condescending to her. She jokingly mentions that she's into guys that row crew, and he gets defensive because he doesn't have that prowess. He can't do anything like that. But then you think about, after you've seen the movie, you know that the Winklevoss twins, they do. They are Olympians. They are the kind of handsome, masculine jock types that every kind of antisocial nerd that sits behind a computer has been envious of their whole lives. And in this generation, because of people like Mark Zuckerberg, those kinds of people finally get their moment to shine. And of course, we do see that later when Zuckerberg finally does kind of get his revenge on the Winklevoss twins. But as the scene goes on, you just see the insecurity just permeating everything that he says, and it gets more and more noticeable. He just continues to justify his actions himself, but he's not listening to her. And then, because he cannot connect with her, he gets angry, and then of course she breaks up with him. This will be the emotional thread that motivates Mark throughout the story. And that need for connection, of course, is inherent in all of us, and that's why it resonates with us despite a lot of his very questionable actions. There are 3 key scenes in the film, at least for me, that spark Mark Zuckerberg's motivations, emotional motivations throughout the entire story. And they all involve females, 2 are repeat. Of course, one is the first scene where he's drunk, and then he goes home and he rants on his blog about Erica, saying, commenting about her bra size, calling her a bitch. And then he creates this rating system online so that men can rate other women. And it's again, out of insecurity and out of anger. The second key moment is when he sees her again later in the film at dinner, and he goes up to her, he wants to talk to her, and of course she wants nothing to do with him. He fails again. He walks away, and what does he say to Eduardo? He says, we have to expand. We have to expand the Facebook. It's his way of, again, covering up, filling that void because of that lack of connection. And that is the cue for the Sean Parker character to enter, really. So, I see this film as a metaphor, of course, for that. But the idea of just building online personas is just so fascinating, because no matter what you do, you can pour your heart and soul out into a vlog or whatever, but ultimately it still is your online persona. And no matter what you do, you envelop yourself into that kind of digital cocoon, as I like to say, that it can't make up for the dopamine rush that you get from the connection with another human. I have to say, everybody in this film is absolutely top-notch, fantastic, but I think that Jesse Eisenberg is the glue that holds it all together. And I know a lot of people don't like him. I've never understood that. I think in this film, this is, for me at least, his best role. I think he does brilliantly because there's that jittery, nervous energy that he has, but it is not overplayed, and it so easily could have been. When he says Sorkin dialogue, it's just perfect. Again, the perfect example of an actor and the collaboration with a great writer. Some people are able to do it where it sings. The sentiment is never forced, and I think a lot of it has to do with what's in his face. He does something really remarkable where his eyes feel very disconnected from the bottom half of his face. But at certain moments, and in particular the scenes that I'm mentioning here, there's just that little just that spark in his eyes of a feeling of loneliness, of pain. But it's ever so slight. And that is why I think that he's just a master of subtlety here. The last scene, and the third key point that I mentioned, is the scene between him and Rashida Jones, and it's at the very end of the film, and it ties it all together, beautifully acted by the both of them. She sees the error in his ways, and she does not judge him for that, and he, of course, is comforted by this. He asks her to dinner. Of course, she has to decline. She gives him good advice, and then she goes on her way, and he's left all alone in that room with his laptop. He opens it, and he just constantly refreshes the page, hoping that Erica will accept his friend request on Facebook. It's a really kind of sad moment, but one that I think we can all understand. It's one of the few moments in the film that is just really quiet. It gives us a chance to breathe, because the movie, it moves very, very fast. But here, we have to see that juxtaposition between all the noise and all of a sudden it's quiet, and that isolation is just going to eat at us. And I think that's a powerful moment, because just in our world, as we all know, we can barely live alone. We cannot live with ourselves. We always have a device in our hand, checking texts. When we're lonely, we can look at Facebook or Twitter or Instagram to constantly reinforce that we're not alone. And we're losing the ability to experience silence, to experience moments of introspection. And I think that that moment there really reflects that. And I got to bring it back to Jesse Eisenberg again. There's a close-up of his face at the end that is so perfect. I think that Fincher is really smart about where he employs close-ups, and I've always respected him so much for that, because I think I would do the same thing. Close-ups can often be too heavy-handed, but here the moment is absolutely earned. And again, because of the subtlety in his face, where you just see a little hint of the pain going on underneath, it's just the perfect amount, and it makes it all the more kind of painful for us as well. And it completes the arc of the story. And I think that returning to this film again, it's a very solid film, a very impressive work. And as I said, the collaborations between all of these different types of artists is what is most impressive to me. There are so many films where people come together and it just doesn't come together for whatever reason, but this is the perfect example of just that sweet spot they were able to find, and that is why the film continues to endure. And that's my review. Thank you all for listening. All my social media information is below. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.